Camp whispers and intel. A lot going on. Tennessee is where I want to start because you lambasted me or basted me, either or, because we didn't talk about the Vols quarterback situation the other night, which I apparently promised I'd talk about every show. Well, let's pick it back up. When we last left off, we were talking about smart money here, smart money there. Well, now it looks like there is some real smart money in the room. There has not been an announcement out of Knoxville about the starting quarterback, but it's pretty safe to say, based on multiple good sources there, Joe Milton is the leader in the clubhouse for this job. Joe Milton, the Michigan transfer. This means something. I was listening to the Go Vols 24/7 pod today, and those guys were talking about probably the pecking order at quarterback. Again, nothing's been announced, but they were talking about the pecking order at quarterback right now. And not only is Joe Milton the overwhelming favorite to take the starting job, but then Hendon Hooker is in all likelihood the leader in the clubhouse to take that number 2 spot. So think about what I just said. Harrison Bailey was the guy who's been on campus for a couple of years now. Mauer's not really figured into this all that much. But Harrison Bailey's been there. And Hendon Hooker got there in the spring. Joe Milton didn't even get spring. And yet those are the 2 guys, which goes to show you the job really was so wide open that a guy could come in after you 2 have already had spring with a new staff, and I'm going to come in cold and I'm still going to take the job. It looks like that's what we're on the precipice of seeing happen. And so that's exciting. Now, here's the second part. The other thing that they were talking about on the Go Vols pod today is, do we know how to interpret Josh Heupel yet, head coach of Tennessee? Do we really know how to interpret him? Because he sounds pretty positive. Some coaches out there are brutally honest. Some of them could be 3-7 and make the team sound like they've just been micro inches away here and fractions of an inch away there. No one really knows how to judge Josh Heupel yet. Says good things, claims good things are happening. He likes this, he likes that, and yet you know your expectations are very low for Tennessee, and so someone's wrong there. Who is it? Are you being misled? Time will tell. How about Florida? Stay in the SEC East for a second. Dan Mullen, speaking about the latest scrimmage in Gainesville, a few things caught my ear. Some of them were the actual words that came out of his mouth, but a lot of it's just the tone and tenor. Emory Jones at quarterback, one of the biggest talking points down in our neck of the woods in the SEC. Emory Jones at quarterback and what to expect, and it's not just that in a vacuum. It's what to expect from an offense that loses generational talent, like Kyle Pitts, for example. Losing Tony's a big deal, but losing Kyle Pitts is a massive deal. But it's not always the end of the world if you have someone or if you have production that can fill that spot. So the assembled media down in Gainesville, they've been asking Dan Mullen, not so much do you have a replacement for Kyle Pitts, but do you have a way to replace that production? So if you take just what Dan Mullen said, you don't go off any rumor or speculation, you just take what Dan Mullen said, you start to paint yourself a picture of what this team's going to be like. And when you listen to him, Dan Mullen being him, when you listen to Dan Mullen talk about the skill set of Emory Jones, and he talks about how tight end and wide receiver, no, it may not be at the level we had last year, but our running back position, we feel way better than we did in 2020. And we know that we have a different skill set at quarterback with Emory Jones. We're going to use his full allotment of skills. Basically, what that translates to is obviously a really different looking offense, but it sounds to me like they believe it's a framework they can win with. Now, if we were to hit the rewind button 15 years and we were going into, let's say, the 2006 season, that's the kind of framework that a lot of eventual BCS and national championship contending teams went with. Today doesn't sound like that so much. You want a guy that can stretch the defense vertically. You want 2 or 3 stud receivers at least, and it's wide open. Well, Florida's offense not going to be wide open this year. But still, I'm willing to meet you in the middle. If you're Dan Mullen, you're telling me all that, I'm willing to meet you in the middle. But if we're going to lean heavily on the run game, then you have to answer this question for me. Is your offensive line up to it? And I know my friends over on the Swamp 24/7 message board who fill my DMs with such lovely messages day in and day out. I know they shudder when I mention the offensive line. And you should. Dan Mullen himself gave about the biggest non-answer answer I've ever heard when asked about offensive line development and recruiting, and he hawed his way around it. I don't know, man. That's a giant question mark. And so the Florida offensive line, if someone out there could reasonably lead me to expect that unit's going to perform above expectation level, I'd feel good. I think Florida could be competitive. I don't feel that yet, and therefore I'm not sure how competitive Florida can be on the national scene is what I'm talking about. I mean, that's the standard at Florida. Now I want to go to a place I'm not sure we've spoken about a lot. Salt Lake City, Utah. Yep. They believe they have two quarterbacks they can win with. I'm going to pause because we don't say that a lot. Ohio State probably believes this. Definitely Oklahoma believes that. Utah believes genuinely now this offense has two quarterbacks they can win with. Cam Rising was the guy who was already there last year, and then Charlie Brewer famously transfers in from Baylor and goes 15 for 15 in the spring game. It's the most quoted spring game stat line of all time, any program. Can you ever tell me any other quarterback stat line from a spring game that you remember? Charlie Brewer, 15 for 15. Live in infamy in Salt Lake City, especially if he locks down the starting job and they win the Pac-12 South, which I'm very close to predicting both of which to happen. So I was reading Blake Brockermeyer's camp notes on 247sports.com today, and it was very timely because I wanted to talk about Utah. So here's what he was talking about. He kind of waited till today to soak in some information from different sources around the country, and he was speaking about the overall expectation level at Utah. They are very, very experienced. And the reason I mention that's not to automatically tell you that means you're going to win X number of games. They're not in this rapid, frenetic pace of installing new concepts and trying to get true freshmen up to speed. They got the concepts. They've got the guys that they know they're going to go into battle with. It's largely the same crew they played with last year. What they've been able to do because of that is they've been able to split more rep time, but they've also been able to fine-tune parts of this team, and they've been able to add layers onto the offense. Their passing game at Utah this year is going to look unlike anything you've probably seen at Utah in quite a while. Now, what does that mean? Well, it probably means that when you watch Utah play some games and they're competitive, but they can't get over the hump enough, they don't have enough skill, in other words, when the games that are one possession or single-digit spreads start stacking up one after the other, Utah can win any one of those games, but they can't go on a run. They can't go on a tear. They can't stretch a win streak because they don't have the passing element. Well, they have that. I think they're going to have that, and they think they're going to have that this year. If they do, that, to me, is the team to beat in the Pac-12 South, above and beyond even USC, above and beyond Arizona State. That's what stands in the way with them. And remember, for all the scheduling dynamic advantage that Southern Cal has in the South, they got Utah as Utah comes off a bye. It's the toughest spot of the season for USC. So I'd just be careful with Utah. I really like them. I mean, they were ranked 24th yesterday in the AP. There are not 24 better teams in the country to start the year than Utah. And lastly, you guys better spread this segment all over the place. You ask me all the time, why don't you talk about the G5 more? Why don't you talk about G5 teams? Let's talk about a G5 team. The Cincinnati Bearcats are in a unique position, the likes of which no other G5 team has really ever found itself in, because they have sky-high expectation level to start the year. They're already in the top 10 to start the year. I think they debuted number 7. And you can tell me all you want to, the AP doesn't matter. It matters. It shapes perspective. It matters. The overall depth on this team is paramount this year because it's as good as pretty much any G5 team you're going to find out there. They got really, really good depth. I was reading Blake's stuff about, he had a lot of good stuff about Cincinnati in his report today too, and he was talking about their last scrimmage and how they feel very good. They've been able to rotate offensive linemen, wide receivers, got some extra DBs, some work the other day. They've got an established quarterback. They've got an established pedigree. This is not new territory for any of those folks. I mean, they were already right on the brink last year, so they felt the heat. The question becomes, with them having the kind of target on their back that they never have, and also being the kind of team that played some close games last year anyway, can they go wire to wire? If they do it, including wins, as you see on the schedule right here, back-to-back, Indiana and Notre Dame on the road, both of them back-to-back. You beat them and you win that conference, this team's going to the playoff. I have very little doubt about that. The rest of the country, you ask, well, what if this team's undefeated, that team's undefeated? It'll work itself out. If Cincinnati's undefeated, that team's going to the playoff. That's the latest Camp Whispers and Intel. Remember, we got second scrimmages coming up for a lot of programs, so you're going to want to keep it locked in here Thursday, and then especially that Sunday show. We're going to have a mountain of information on that Sunday show. I think that Sunday show is going over an hour. If I had to bet right now, I think it's going over an hour.